The agenda, real quick. I mentioned a couple of things, but we're special topics, right? So we're not talking core process. This is focused on complex interconnections, right? That would be expedited and standard process. Um, Projects may be impacted by either of these two topics here. So we're not getting into simplified process. We're not talking about residential interconnections here. This is focused on the more complex interconnections and potential process steps that we'll be working through. So the first one is around group study and some changes based on lessons learned, right? Based on questions and conversations with projects that have been progressing through group studies. So we want to try to proactively address some stuff now, make some process improvements that make sense, and communicate that out. We're also going to talk around ASO process changes here, right? So we've been dealing with ASO now for 3 or 4 years. Affected system operator studies, the majority of those are impacted by transmission and ISO. So we'll talk about some process changes there and get that out. And then we'll have time, plenty of time, we believe, for Q&A at the end. I think we scheduled more time than we're ultimately going to need to get through everything. But I believe we did just post a couple of minutes ago in the chat a link to submit your questions, right? So if you have questions, please write them down, submit them through those, and we'll take those questions during the Q&A period and get the right people answering those questions. So we'll jump into quick safety message, as is customary here at National Grid. Right, just around fall safety, right? I think back to school's a big one that happens this time of year. My kids have been back in school for 2.5 weeks now. So, I do stand out at a bus stop on a daily basis. People do drive crazy despite seeing kids and knowing buses are out there, right? So it is definitely a pet peeve of mine. So, just a reminder, right, around school buses, taking it easy at that time in the morning. Kids can get on the bus as early as, 6:15 in the morning all the way up through 8:30, 9 o'clock. So it's kind of a big window. And then some of those hours are still kind of dark. So just pay attention. Don't be in a rush. And that's the last thing any of us ever want to have happen, right? A kid waiting for a bus and have something go wrong. So always keep that in the back of your mind. Just touching on fall hazards, leaves falling, those type of things that are going to start around this time of year. I've actually seen a lot more leaves falling earlier than usual because I think of some of the drought issues that we've been having up here in the Northeast and that kind of stuff. But those leaves are falling. They are slippery, both when dry and wet. Wanting to try to avoid slip, trips, and falls, right? And obviously car accidents and anything like that, right? Because if it does rain and those leaves get wet, it is like driving on ice. So try to keep those clear and try to be conscious of those potential hazards around leaves. And just, it's not cold yet, right? But we assume it's going to start to get cooler out, right? Maybe spending a little bit more time inside, getting into cold and flu season, in addition to, our ongoing multiple year pandemic. So just, make smart decisions, you know, and think of others. I think is the best way to kind of put that. But we are starting to get back into that season again. So with that, I'll ask everybody to stay on mute. I'm going to turn my camera off. The presenters will not have their cameras on, just for bandwidth reasons. We're up to about 60 people in this call, so we'll leave cameras off for that. And then if you have questions, the link to that is posted in the chat, and we'll post it again in a little bit. But I will hand it over to Emily and Taylor to get us going on group study.
All right. So The intent of these slides is to go over the primary assessment milestone that is part of the group study process. The primary assessment is intended to bring group members details at a high level around potential high cost impacts associated with the common system modifications that are required as part of the group study, as well as the associated thresholds that are being crossed to inform those system modifications. The hope is that arming group members with this information can help inform the collective decisions shaping the balance of the group study. Target timelines for the primary assessment will vary by the length of the study. For a 100 business day study, it will be delivered at around the 40 business day mark, all the way up to a 160 business day study where it will be delivered at approximately 60 business days. The communication would be delivered to all group members so that they can make informed decisions around any project changes that they wish to submit. To the next slide. So following the delivery of the primary assessment, the group study timeline will be placed on hold for a 10 business day hold to allow group members to review the information that's been provided and submit any desired changes to the to their project. So that includes potentially project size or project operating modes that might be modified in response to the information that's provided. All changes will need to be unanimously consented to in accordance with the group study provisions within the tariff. Following the receipt of any desired changes from group members at the end of that 10 business day period, we will continue with the balance of the study according to the project documentation that has been received for each individual project site. So that will shape the analysis that and the resulting common system impacts that are included in the remainder of the study timeline. Next slide.
So moving on, once we get to the completion of the group study reports will be delivered as a final version to all group members. And then when we deliver these reports, we'll also include any outstanding document revisions that are required. And then with the delivery of the final report, 15 business day notice period timeline will begin. And during these 15 business days, members are asked to confirm their intent to continue through the interconnection process and then receive an ISA. This confirmation will confirm the allocation of common system modification costs as appropriate. And then members who do not respond or do not intend to proceed will be withdrawn from the interconnection queue. And all outstanding document revisions are expected to be submitted, reviewed, and approved ahead of the ISA delivery. And this is in parallel with the same 15 business day notice period timeline as mentioned. And projects that do not have approved document revisions upon the delivery of the ISA will also be withdrawn from the queue. And an executable ISA will be delivered in accordance with the group study tariff. These timelines will vary from 15, 25, and 35 business days. That is dependent on the size of the group study. So in summary, the study will complete, and then within 15 business days, group members will provide their intent to proceed or not. as well as any document revisions. And then on completion of those 15 business days, that's when the ISA drafting will begin. Next slide.
Great, thank you so much, Taylor. Hello, everyone. My name is Jamie Tobin, and I will be presenting some ASO process changes and updates. So this first slide here gives a high-level overview of what is changing and why. Once we cover that, I will get into more specifics on each type of change. So first, we will be requiring a PSCAD model and PSCAD model review payment for every proposed system over 1 megawatt, as well as a PSSC model and PSSC model review payment for any system 5 megawatts or greater. This will be requested at the beginning of a distribution study, whether that is a group study or an individual system impact study. The request will take place at the beginning of that study. Next, we will provide and implement a more defined review and approval process of those required models. And lastly, the ASO initiation timeline is now pushed out later in the interconnection process. This means ASO studies will begin later, as well as RC submissions to ISO New England. The purpose behind all of these changes is to provide consistency and a more organized structure to the ASO process entirely. These changes will also assist in preventing delays for the start of an ASO study, and also by providing a defined model review and approval process will help improve efficiency. And lastly here, pushing the ASO timeline out will allow the distribution analysis to mature, resulting in greater confidence in the ASO study inputs. So we can move to the next slide. This slide will cover the ASO initiation timeline for all study types. Please be aware that these timelines will impact any individual application that is greater than 1 megawatt. Though less common nowadays for a regular 55 business day system impact study, the ASO initiation timeline will begin at the 35 business day mark. For circumstances where an ASO study need is identified upon commencement of the distribution portion of that study, an ASO study will be able to begin at the 35 business day mark. If the need for an ASO study is not already defined at this point, this means the project will be submitted to the RC for ISO New England review here. Please note that this ISO review may also result in a need for an ASO study, which at this point in the process can commence once we have all approved models and have collected the ASO study fee. So now this should be a little bit more seamless than it has been since the models have been collected at the beginning of the distribution study. Now we can move into the group study timeline. So for group studies, an ASO study is almost certain for projects greater than 1 megawatt. So the timelines you see here will be the ASO study start date. An ASO study for a 100 business day group study can commence at the 65 business day. ASO study for a 125 business day group study can commence at the 80 business day mark. And lastly, an ASO study for a 160 business day group study can commence at the 105 business day mark. So this means National Grid should already have approved models, model review payments, and ASO study fee payments at the ASO initiation point, so the ASO study can start on time. And I'll move to the next slide here. This slide covers a step-by-step overview of the new model review and approval process. As I mentioned at the beginning, all systems greater than 1 megawatt will require PSCAD model and model review payments, and all systems 5 megawatts or more will also require PSSC models and PSSC model review payments. I want to further highlight that this is a requirement for all projects, regardless if an ASO study is required. So the first step here states we will request models and model review payments right at the beginning of a distribution study. The customer will then have 15 business days to submit their models and payment for the review of those models. The company will then perform the initial review of the models. If there are model deficiencies identified by the engineers, the customer will need to submit a model revision to address those deficiencies, which then the company will perform a second review of those model changes. And if there are still deficiencies identified after the second review, the customer will need to submit another model revision. At this point, the company will then perform a third and final review of those model changes. If there are still deficiencies present after the third review, the customer will need to submit additional payment for further model review. To summarize this table, the customer will have 3 attempts at submitting an approved working model before additional model review payment is required, and the new model review process will not take place until payment has been received. That being said, with the implementation of the new ASO initiation timeline mentioned in the previous slide, we will be able to determine an ASO study start date upon the commencement of a distribution study. Since an ASO study start date will already be determined, if there are still model deficiencies by the time of that ASO study start date, the applicant will not be able to move forward with the interconnection process, and their application will be withdrawn from the interconnection queue. I'm going to move to the next slide to further highlight that. This slide here just reiterates what I just mentioned previously. I want to be clear that even though a model submission will consist of 3 attempts for model approval, if models are not approved by the ASO study start date, they'll not be able to move forward regardless of how many times they have been reviewed. This is why we will be requesting models much earlier in the interconnection process, because it allows much more time to receive approved working models before the start of the ASO study. Another thing to note, that model review costs are for each discrete model submission. For example, if a customer changes their inverter in the middle of a model review process, they will need to submit another payment for model review, and the process will reset. All in all, model review and changes are triaged by the transmission engineer responsible for the ASO activity. And then I'll jump to the next slide. This slide shows a table of expected costs for each type of model review. The first table covers PSCAD model review pricing, while the second covers PSSE model review pricing. Both tables are broken down by system type. We have a unique PV model review cost, a unique battery model review cost, and then a unique PV with battery model review cost. I want to mention that these costs are separate from the ASO study fee costs. The model review costs will be requested at the same time we request the models, which takes place upon the commencement of the distribution study, and then the ASO study fee will be collected at least 25 business days before the ASO study start date. So this is the last slide I have here on the ASO changes, but I want to mention this presentation and recording will also be uploaded to our stakeholder meeting page by the end of the day. Additionally, an FAQ document is forthcoming, which will also outline these changes in much detail. But yes, that is all I have, and I will hand off the Q&A portion to Will. But thank you all so much for your time.
Thanks, Jamie. So we'll move into questions here. So again, in the chat, it was posted how to submit questions. So we do have one in here. I'll stall a little bit to see if other people are gonna upload a few. But I do just want to make quick mention that this is a special topics session, right? So we are only going to be addressing questions around these 2 topics. If you do have other questions that are being submitted, if you do put in your contact information, we will reach back out and have a conversation to answer your question, but we would not be addressing off-topic questions on this call right here. So just if you do have a question that's off topic and you feel like you want to submit it, I encourage that. Just make sure that you are adding in your contact info so we can follow up at a later date. So with that one, see a few of them jumping in here, but Taylor, I'll line you up for the first one. A little bit of a generic question around: is there a central place on the portal to track the status of group studies? Right? Are we looking at potentially adding start dates and the duration of the studies? And then how often is it updated?
Yeah, so we have the group study map, which is intended to be updated on a monthly basis around the 1st of every month. So we do expect the next update to be coming shortly as well. And this map shows group studies with current holds, ongoing ASO studies, group studies that are accepting applications, which is the group window status, as well as group studies that are in progress. At this moment, we don't have on the map that it doesn't show the like the start date and the estimated completion date, but you can find that like on your case page in the portal.
Thank you, Taylor. So just continuing on, when would a project be typically informed that they are going to be moving into a group study?
They would be informed at the open of a group window.
And that would happen in the project life cycle, right, during the screening stage?
Yep, at screening complete.
Yep. Thank you. Hi, Jamie. I'll tee you up here, right? We got a number of PS-CAD model questions that we'll touch on. The first one is just wanting to confirm whether a PS-CAD model requirement is for project-specific model rather than generic.
Yeah, so I guess I'm just a little unclear what they mean by project specific versus generic. But the requirement is for all systems, projects that have a system greater than a megawatt. I don't know if that helps clear that up, but.
Yeah, so we actually got a couple of questions along that same line. I'm actually happy for someone, if that is your question, if you wanted to come off mute and clarify the question around generic versus project specific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Will. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, Camille.
Okay. Yep. So a project specific PS-CAD model would have to be, we would request a generic model from the manufacturer and then give it to a third-party engineering firm to alter it to be tailored to our projects, and that has, some cost implications. So it would have to be altered. Does that clarify?
So you're asking if when you submit, when you receive those models, is that a requirement for, I guess, wouldn't you be submitting those models to us anyways if you're getting them done elsewhere?
Yeah, so normally we just request the generic models from the manufacturer and provide that to Eversource. But for the ASO studies, they required project-specific models.
Oh, I guess I get what you're saying. So yes, it would be project-specific models. So because we would be we would be needing to test that against the system
with the ASO study pending.
Yep. Yes.
Okay.
And yes, it would be a requirement. Project-specific models would be a requirement for every single application that has a system over a megawatt.
Got it. Okay. Thanks for that clarification.
Sorry for the confusion.
Okay, so Jamie, I'm going to ask you another one here. It says, how does National Grid coordinate with ISO New England on ASOs, right? Specifically, when a new ISO New England Q project executes an SISA, does ISO New England require the ongoing National Grid DER ASO study to be restudied with the new ISO New England considered in the project?
So I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, but we wouldn't restudy something that's already gone through an ASO study because that queue, because of the queue, I want to say. So at this, whether ISO has their own projects going through an ASO study, that would not interfere with our ASO study timeline or queue. Once it's studied and once it's gone through an ASO study, I don't want to say never unless there's changes to the system, it's not going to be studied again. Also, please speak up if I did not answer your question.
Yeah, thanks. That helps. I guess maybe if the ASO study, if the National Grid ASO study for a collection of distribution connected generators was not yet complete, it was 90% complete, hadn't gone through the I-39 yet, and then one or more FERC jurisdictional transmission interconnected generators jumps into the ISO queue in the same electrical area as the ongoing ASO study.
I got it.
Yeah, it was my understanding that, Grid would kind of be directed by ISO to stick these new projects into the model and basically have to start all over.
Yep, so the FERC projects that they're studying, as long as the ASO study for National Grid has already commenced, like even if it is 90% done, it has already started, that would not be impacted by an incoming FERC application. The FERC application would happen behind that ASO study. But if the ASO study has not yet started and then there was a plan for it to start and there was an incoming FERC application that is ahead in queue, then that ASO study for National Grid would be delayed behind the FERC project. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that is a wonderful answer. If that's how, if you've gotten the okay from ISO to do it that way, I'm hearing that elsewhere they don't quite have that agreement. Like I don't know how it seems to me that other jurisdictions have kind of been doing it the other way, where they have to start over.
Right, I'm like 99% sure that's how it works. So Will or Mike, please correct me if I'm wrong. But that's the way we handle it here.
Yep, that was my impression also, right? That, obviously if we were talking 90% complete, right, it was not going to be a full start over. I think we've had a lot of dealings with the ISO over the last several years here. But I agree with your response, Jamie.
Great.
All right, I'm gonna throw a couple out here. I'm gonna take on myself. Right, so the first one is PSCAD and PSSE model reviews, right? It's asking about whether we're gonna make public a list of models that have been studied and the results of those studies, that will eventually result in developers using equipment that have acceptable models. That's a question that we will take back and have a conversation with our engineering teams. But it is not something that we as National Grid have been traditionally doing, right? Providing results of studies that, or publicly providing results of studies around specific models or anything like that. So it's not something that we have been doing. It's not something we currently intend to do, but it is a conversation that we can take back and discuss. And if it is something that we feel like we could do without running into confidentiality or any issues around that, right, we can have a discussion. But as of right now, it is not the intent to provide that publicly. Another one is, will National Grid provide training for inverter manufacturers and electrical engineering firms that are having trouble understanding what is required for site-specific models? So again, at this time, we do not have the intent of providing any specific training, but we are and continue to make ourselves available for questions and back and forth, right? And our touch point is with the developer, right? Not with your specific contracting firms or any of that. But we are always we always welcome additional parties to be part of any conversation. So if you are looking to ask questions, get some clarity, and you want to set up a meeting with your job owner, with Jamie, to have a meeting with one of our transmission or distribution engineers. We're happy to have that set up, and we're happy to have you as the customer invite whoever else from your team that would make sense. So again, not planning any training specifically, but open to have back and forth and conversations as necessary. But again, I'll put that on the, let's take that back, have a conversation around it. If it's something that seems like it could make sense and could make everybody's life easier, happy to explore that. All right, so a couple more questions popping in here. So the next one, I think potentially Emily, this one may be directed at you, but it says a majority of your mass territory seems to be under group studies. Right? These group studies cover multiple substations. It seems to be holding up smaller projects. Seems like this one's around 230 kW that are passing screens, but they're being put on hold for 6 to 12 months, pending results of existing group studies. What are these kW levels for an expedited project being held up? I think I'll take a quick pass at this, Emily, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. But essentially, we're looking at anything over 25 kW here at this point is going to be reviewed as possibly in a group study. And, that doesn't mean the project will end up in the group study. It does not mean that they'll be part of the expected necessary system modifications and solutions that would come out of that group study, but those projects do need to be reviewed. We do need to understand what the impact of the system is, what the impact to the overall group would be. And then during that primary assessment period, right, decisions can be made whether projects need to remain in a group study or may have the opportunity to be pulled out of the group study and progress on an individual basis. But with that said, projects, right, that would not have traditionally gone down a standard path, projects that would be expedited, all the way down to the lower levels around 25 kW are going to need to be reviewed going forward. If there is a pending group study, if there is an existing group study, those projects will most likely be put on hold and held on behind the existing group study until that progresses. But that's a lower end limit of what it is we're looking at, potentially having impact to the group study. Emma, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to that.
No, I think that covers most of it. Just, we, the need for a group study is determined based on, an aggregation of applications within an electrically common study area. And so, while we may ultimately, after some maturity of analysis, be able to determine that some individual applications are not contributing to common system conditions or the need for common system modifications and can be progressed outside of the group. Oftentimes we cannot know that until we've done some level of engineering analysis. So, we need to include all of the applications within that electrically common study area, from the outset, until we can make that determination.
Thank you. And then just a sort of follow-on question in the same chunk here, right? But it seems like some of these should be ASO studies and tied to transmission. Maybe I'll let you take a first pass at that, and then I can fill in.
Sure. Yep. So when we make a group study, when we open a group study window, it is based off of distribution system needs and distribution system interdependencies. We determine that an aggregation of projects have a collective potential impact to the distribution assets in a common area, and those impacts, are are common amongst multiple applications, and the solution, can impact multiple applications. And in order to come up with the most efficient means to address common system impacts, it is advantageous to study them collectively under the group study construct. We are making those determinations based on distribution system needs and distribution considerations. ASO study requirements are based on transmission level considerations. So those considerations may align with the distribution considerations, but they are two different sets of assets that are being considered. It could be the case that certain applications may be treated collectively at the D and not T level, or T and not D level, right? There's different considerations. Often they generally align, but it's not one or the other.
Thank you. I don't have anything to add, right? I think you made the good point around, right, these are distribution interconnections, right? And that's how we start the process, and then see where things go from there. But thank you. Jamie, I got one for you here. It says, do all projects greater than 1 megawatt, even if not in a group study, have to go through an ASO study?
Thanks, Phil. So they don't have to, but it is very likely that they will have to go through an ASO study. I just don't want to say like right off the bat that it's an automatic requirement. The decision is determined ultimately by the ASO New England when we submit that specific project to the RC, which will take place at the 35 business day mark. We may even know before that time, especially if there's already been an ASO study performed in the area of that project. But it is definitely more common for an ASO study to be required now than not. I just don't want to say it definitely will have to go through.
Thank you.
One.
We'll keep it going for you. It says for National Grid 55 business day impact study for systems over one megawatt, is the impact study timeline automatically extended due to the ASO study?
So the timeline is not extended. The ASO initiation portion is just pushed out further within the impact study. So it originally took place around the 20 business days, but now it will not take place until the 35 business days. It doesn't add any more time to the impact study, but when we do get to that 35 business day mark, the impact study will go on hold. So it may seem like it's extended because of the hold, but it technically isn't.
Yep. Yeah, and I think just to add the point that I mentioned at the beginning of this, that over time we get lessons learned and we go through these different processes. And one of the things that we had identified early on when ASO studies started to impact projects, right? We thought the 20 business day timeline made sense to sort of place the project on hold in the impact study. Essentially, they placed the impact study on hold and move forward from there, right? Over time, we've seen, right, the need for additional information and taking that a few steps further, right, to make sure that we are providing the ISO and our transmission engineers with necessary information. So again, just process changes over time based on lessons learned. But the big point, to reiterate Jamie's point, right, it doesn't extend the 55 business day timeline. It puts that timeline on hold, just at a different point in the process, pending the ASO completion. So thanks, Jamie. Quick hitter here, right, says, will the slideshow be available post-meeting and how do we access it? So it will be posted most likely by the end of the day, both this recording in addition to the slide deck. The Q&A will follow here in the coming days to get that up also. But I believe, Jamie, do we send out a link to all participants post-meeting too that would take you directly to where these things are posted?
Yep, I'll send out an email by the end of the day today with resources.
Yep. So just to make it easier, that link will be provided directly to you. So last question on here. Yep, last question. It is are behind the meter projects subject to the same group study review requirements? So Mike, can I throw that over to you, Mike Picaro?
Yeah, thanks, Will. Yeah, so regardless of whether you're behind the meter or in front of the meter, it still is going to have a impact to the system from a feeder level perspective or even a substation level perspective. And when we talk about the groups, you know, the aggregate together can have an entire area impact. So they would still be subject to the same requirements for review and analysis and consideration in the group study.
Thank you, Mike. Right, I think just to that point here, right, we do still see, just because it's behind the meter, just because it's no export, right, certain situations and applications that we see come in, any and all of those scenarios impact, right, the National Grid electric power system, right? So, you know, it does require study, then that is what forces those into these certain processes that are identified. So there is one last question here that just popped in. It says, can you briefly outline the different points during the group study timeline, from entering group study through ASO, where National Grid deems it permissible for a project to withdraw from group study, where it would either trigger restudy or extend timelines from original quoted timeline estimates? So Taylor, maybe you can take a first pass.
Yeah, so any group member can withdraw their project at any point throughout the group study process. It's just that all group study fees are non-refundable. And then I'm not 100% sure where it would trigger a restudy or extended timelines. If somebody else can jump in on that one.
I can jump in. So this is really something that would be a case by case assessment. It depends on the maturity of the analysis. It depends on the impacts of the project withdrawing to that analysis and how much rework would result from removing that case from the analysis. So upon notification of a withdrawal, we would need to make that case-by-case assessment to determine what the impacts to the remainder of the group study would be based on individual circumstances.
Thank you, Taylor and Emily. Okay, so that is the last question that has populated here. So we'll move to close down the meeting. Appreciate the presenters, appreciate all the attendees taking the time, appreciate the people who submitted questions. Again, just to reiterate, we will post both this recording and the slide deck by the end of the day today. This Q&A, we will work up a Q&A doc so you can see the answers in writing. That will take us several days to make happen and also get posted, but that will be posted in the same location. We will follow up here at the end of the day once everything has been posted with the link to the attendees, so it will take you right there, make it nice and easy to find. But we appreciate everybody taking the time. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll have another process related seminar in a few weeks in October. But thank you.
Thank you.